The black belt never asked my name. He only looked at my gray hair, laughed, and threw his MMA gloves at my feet. You've got 60 seconds to prove you're not all stories, old man. The entire neighborhood stopped what they were doing. Phones came out. His millionaire father smiled confidently from the front lawn. Someone started a countdown. Nobody noticed I wasn't looking at the young fighter. I was looking at his stance, his breathing, his confidence, because I'd seen that exact look before. Years earlier, I stood in front of young men who thought confidence alone could win. I buried some of them. The survivors became Army Rangers. The first thing that hit the pavement wasn't a punch. It was a pair of expensive black MMA gloves. They landed right in my boots with a dull thud. Every conversation on the street stopped. Children paused their basketball game. Music from the neighborhood barbecue faded into the background. Even the sizzling burgers on the grill seemed forgotten as dozens of eyes shifted toward me. I looked down at the gloves, then slowly raised my head. Standing across the driveway was Tyler Hastings, 23 years old, state-level MMA competitor, black belt, built like someone who never missed leg day. He wore a grin that said he already believed he'd won. "Well," he called loudly, "you gonna leave them there, old man?" A few people laughed. Not cruelly. More the kind of laughter people give when they expect harmless entertainment. Several neighbors already had their phones out, recording. Tyler loved an audience. His father, Richard Hastings, loved one even more. Richard had moved into our subdivision 4 years earlier after selling his software company for what everyone guessed was somewhere north of $50 million. He never confirmed the number. He didn't have to. The imported sports cars that rotated through his garage every few months spoke loudly enough. So did the backyard parties, the catered events, and the constant reminders that success deserved to be noticed. Richard wasn't a bad man. He simply believed money solved nearly everything. His son believed something similar. Only instead of money, he trusted strength. Tyler trained twice a day, competed regularly, and documented nearly every workout online. Thousands followed him across social media. His favorite videos weren't about discipline or training. They were challenge videos, calling people out, showing off, winning applause. Most people admired his confidence. Some mistook it for maturity. I never did. My wife, Ellen, leaned closer beside me. "Jack." Her voice stayed calm, but I knew that tone. It meant she already sensed trouble. "You don't have to answer him." "I know." She gently touched my arm. "Then don't." I smiled. I wasn't planning on giving him what he wants. The annual Maple Ridge Summer Cookout had always been the one afternoon when the entire neighborhood forgot work schedules and deadlines. Kids raced bicycles through the cul-de-sac. Parents compared vacation plans. Grandparents sat beneath folding canopies, sharing stories that somehow became better every year. Normally, I enjoyed it. Retirement had taught me to appreciate quiet moments. After 30 years of military service, quiet became something precious. Most people here only knew me as the older guy who fixed bicycles for neighborhood kids, shoveled snow for elderly neighbors before sunrise, and spent too much time tending tomatoes in the backyard. That's exactly how I liked it. I had no interest in talking about my past. The uniform had been folded away years ago. So had the rank. Titles matter while you're wearing them. Character matters after you take them off. Unfortunately, Tyler had mistaken silence for weakness. It started 3 weeks earlier. He'd watched me carrying bags of mulch into my backyard. "Need some help there, Grandpa?" he joked. "I'd hate for gardening to count as your workout." I laughed. So far, the tomatoes haven't beaten me. He looked disappointed that I hadn't taken the bait. Since then, every conversation seemed to become another attempt to prove something, usually to his friends, sometimes to himself. Earlier that afternoon, someone mentioned military service while we stood around the grill. Richard smiled proudly at his son. "Tyler says today's fighters would embarrass most soldiers in hand-to-hand training." Several people chuckled. Someone asked me what I thought. I shrugged. Different skills, different missions. Tyler wasn't satisfied. "So, you're saying fighters aren't tougher?" "I'm saying comparisons rarely prove anything." He crossed his arms. "That's a politician's answer."
No.
It's an honest one. The conversation could have ended there. It should have ended there. Instead, Tyler walked to his gym bag sitting beside the patio table. He slowly pulled out his gloves, looked around to make sure everyone was watching, then tossed them across the driveway. They slid until they stopped against my boots. If you've really got all that military experience people whisper about. His smile widened. Put them on. The crowd became perfectly still. Even Richard stopped smiling. Everyone waited. Some expected me to refuse. Others expected an argument. Neither happened. I bent down, picked up the gloves, brushed a little dust from one of them, then looked directly at Tyler. My voice never rose above normal conversation. If we're going to do this. I paused just long enough for every phone recording to capture the moment. We're going to do it with rules, respect. I slipped the gloves over one hand and calmly met his eyes. And witnesses. The laughter disappeared. Just like that, the atmosphere on Maple Ridge Drive completely changed. Tyler's grin grew even wider when I slipped the gloves over my hands. He thought that meant I'd accepted his challenge. He couldn't have been more wrong. I fastened the wrist strap, then handed the gloves back to him. They fit you better than me, I said. A few people looked confused. Tyler laughed loudly. So you're backing out?
No.
I'm making sure we both understand what we're actually doing. He rolled his shoulders dramatically. We're fighting.
No.
I shook my head. We're proving something. And what's that? I looked around at the neighbors standing in a wide circle. Children sat on bicycles. Parents held paper plates they had forgotten to eat from. Phones remained pointed toward us. That depends, I answered calmly. On what? On whether you're trying to learn or trying to impress. The smile on his face tightened. I don't need a lecture. I wasn't giving one. Richard stepped forward, trying to lighten the mood.
Come on, Jack.
Tyler's just having a little fun.
I smiled politely.
I believe him. Tyler folded his arms. So, what's the problem? The audience. He looked around proudly. What about them? They're watching two adults. So, they'll remember how we behave long after they forget who won. For the first time all afternoon, Tyler didn't have an answer ready. He simply scoffed. You military guys always talk in riddles.
No.
I learned that actions explain themselves. He took 2 quick steps closer. I've trained for 15 years. I can see that. I've won regional tournaments. I'm sure you earned them. I'm a black belt. I don't doubt it. His frustration kept growing because I wasn't arguing. Confidence feeds on resistance. Calmness starves it. He wanted me angry. He wanted a dramatic video. He wanted a story he could upload before sunset. Instead, he had an old man who refused to play the part he'd written. One of the older neighbors quietly walked toward me. His name was Bill Anderson, retired Marine, 72. We'd shared coffee dozens of mornings over the years. He stopped beside me. You still carry yourself the same way. I smiled. I've slowed down. Not your posture. Tyler frowned. You two know each other? Bill chuckled. Enough. Then he looked directly at Tyler. Do you know why Jack never talks about his military career? Tyler shrugged. Because it wasn't that impressive? Several people laughed nervously. Bill didn't.
No.
It's because people who actually carried responsibility rarely feel the need to advertise it. The neighborhood became noticeably quieter. Richard crossed his arms. Bill, let's not make this bigger than it is. I'm not. Bill answered calmly. I'm making sure everyone understands who they're judging.
Tyler looked back at me.
So, what exactly did you do? For a few seconds, I considered refusing to answer. I'd spent years leaving that chapter behind. Not because I was ashamed, because I'd learned something important. The best leaders don't spend retirement reminding everyone they once held authority. They simply try to deserve respect without it. But today, remaining silent wasn't helping anyone. I spent most of my career leading soldiers, I said. Tyler shrugged. So leadership teaches different lessons than competition. He smirked. Like what? That confidence is useful. But overconfidence is expensive.
His jaw tightened.
You saying I'm arrogant? I'm saying you've mistaken skill for invincibility. Richard finally stepped between us. Jack, Tyler didn't mean any disrespect. Before I could answer, Bill spoke first. No, Richard. He meant every word. Silence settled across the driveway. Then another voice came from behind the crowd. Coach Miguel Ramirez, owner of the local martial arts academy. He had arrived late carrying a tray of food. I've been listening for the last 5 minutes. Everyone turned toward him. Miguel had coached fighters for more than 20 years. Even Tyler had attended several seminars at his gym. Miguel set the tray on a nearby table. If this is becoming some kind of demonstration, he said, then let's make sure it stays educational. Tyler immediately nodded. Fine with me. Miguel looked at me. What about you? Only if nobody gets hurt. Miguel smiled. Good answer. He walked into the center of the cul-de-sac. No strikes. No submissions. No head contact. No cheap shots. This will be about balance, movement, control, and respect. Several neighbors lowered their phones. The atmosphere had changed. This no longer felt like internet entertainment. It felt like a lesson. Tyler bounced lightly on his feet. Still confident. Still smiling. But not quite as comfortably as before. Bill leaned toward one of the younger fathers standing nearby. You know who Jack really was? The man shook his head. Bill looked around the entire gathering before speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. For nearly 6 years, he said slowly, this quiet man standing in front of you commanded Army Rangers. The words seemed to freeze the afternoon. Conversation stopped. Even Tyler's confident smile disappeared. Richard stared at me as though he'd never seen me before. One neighbor whispered, Wait, seriously? Another quietly lowered his phone altogether. Nobody laughed anymore. The crowd wasn't looking at an old retiree now. They were looking at a man whose calmness suddenly made perfect sense. And for the first time since those gloves had landed at my feet, I noticed something I hadn't seen all afternoon. The confidence in Richard Hastings' face was gone. In its place was concern. Nobody spoke. Even the children seemed to sense the moment had become something entirely different. Coach Ramirez stepped into the center of the cul-de-sac and looked at both of us. All right, if we're doing this, we're doing it my way. Tyler nodded immediately. Works for me. Coach Ramirez turned toward me. Jack. I agreed to a lesson. Nothing more. He smiled. Good. He motioned us toward an open section of pavement. This isn't a fight. It's a controlled demonstration. If I tell either of you to stop, you stop. We both answered at the same time. Understood. The crowd naturally formed a wide circle. Phones were still recording, but something had changed. People weren't waiting to see someone get hurt anymore. They wanted to see what would happen. Tyler stretched confidently. His breathing was fast. Not from fear. From excitement. Mine stayed slow. Steady. The same rhythm I'd learned decades earlier, whenever calm mattered more than speed. Coach Ramirez raised one hand. Begin. Tyler circled to his left. Light on his feet. Technically sharp. Everything about his movement showed years of disciplined training. I noticed it immediately. He was good. Very good. But I also noticed something else. His eyes kept drifting toward the crowd. Every few seconds. Looking for reactions. Looking for approval. Looking for the next viral moment. He wasn't completely focused. I stayed where I was. Relaxed. Hands open. No aggressive posture. No intimidation. Just balance. Tyler finally spoke. You're not even going to defend yourself? I already am. He frowned. What does that mean? It means patience. He stepped closer, quickly changing angles, trying to pressure me into reacting. I simply adjusted my footing. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to stay comfortably out of his path. He advanced again. This time faster. Again. I moved only as much as necessary. Coach Ramirez watched silently. So did Bill. So did Richard. The neighborhood had become completely quiet. Tyler stopped moving. Confused. Stand still. He snapped. I am. No, you're avoiding me. I smiled. There's a difference. His frustration grew. He lunged forward one more time, trying to force the pace. Before he finished the movement, I calmly shifted one step to the side, placed a gentle hand against his shoulder, redirected his momentum. Nothing violent, nothing flashy, just enough. Tyler stumbled 2 quick steps before catching himself. Coach Ramirez raised his hand. Stop. Everyone remained silent. Tyler turned around. His face wasn't embarrassed. It was puzzled. What happened? Coach Ramirez answered before I could. You chased him. You never made him react. You only reacted to him.
Tyler looked at me.
I didn't even touch you. You didn't need to. I answered quietly. You were fighting your own emotions. Coach Ramirez nodded. Exactly. He walked between us. Skill matters. Fitness matters. Training matters. But none of them work very well when pride starts making decisions. Tyler lowered his eyes. For the first time that afternoon, his confidence wasn't gone. It had simply become humility. He slowly removed one glove, then the other, walked toward me, extended his hand. I'm sorry. The apology surprised everyone, including his father. I judged you because of your age. I thought experience stopped mattering once people were tired. I shook his hand firmly.
No.
It simply changes jobs. He smiled faintly. I've got a lot to learn. So do we all. Richard walked over a moment later. The expensive watch, the designer sunglasses, the confidence that usually filled every conversation. None of it mattered now. I owe you an apology too, he admitted. I should have stopped this before it started. I nodded. You did today. He looked confused. I did. You admitted it. That's where respect begins. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Bill started clapping. One neighbor joined him, then another. Within moments, the entire street applauded, not because someone had been defeated, because everyone had witnessed something much more valuable than victory. Coach Ramirez smiled. I wish every challenge ended like this. So do I. Tyler picked up his gloves. This time, he didn't throw them. He carried them home. That evening, the barbecue continued. Children returned to their games. Neighbors laughed together again. Richard sat beside me for nearly an hour. For the first time since he'd moved into Maple Ridge, we talked like neighbors instead of competitors. A week later, Tyler knocked on my front door. Not with cameras, not with an audience, just himself. He asked if I'd join him for coffee once a month. He wanted to hear stories about leadership, not battles, not medals, leadership. We've met on the first Saturday of every month ever since. People sometimes ask if I won that challenge. They're asking the wrong question. Winning wasn't the point. If I'd embarrassed Tyler, I would have taught him nothing. If he'd embarrassed me, he would have learned nothing. The real victory happened the moment pride stepped aside, and respect took its place. Because muscles grow with training, skills grow with practice. But character only grows when you're willing to learn from someone you underestimated. And that's the strongest lesson I ever brought home from the Army.